My brothers and sisters, throughout salvation history, particularly after the incarnation and after the death of Jesus, people have looked at his preaching, have looked at what he taught us and what he left us to live, and have tried to reinterpret it in one way or another, to lessen the demands of the gospel, or to increase those demands to an impossible level. The reality is, though, that Jesus did not come to do away with the structures God had given his chosen people, as he tells us in the gospel today, nor did he come to add so much more as to make it impossible to live. What Jesus came to do is to give his life that we might have life and have an abundance in this world and in the world to come. Today's readings invite us to focus on the core of Jesus' teaching, on his expression of the law that God had given his chosen people, how that law is meant to live. As we consider the concept of the law, the Ten Commandments, there's many misinterpretations that come about. People look at the law in one of two ways. Many people see the law as the list of thou shalt nots, of a whole canticle of do not do these things, and if you do these things, and if you weigh those two together, then you figure out where your relationship with God is. And the ironic thing is that as much as they feel that the law constrains them and limits their life, they also feel that it makes it easy for them to know where they stand in relationship with God and with each other. This whole list of demands on them, on their gifts, on their talents, on their freedoms, becomes the structure that confines, a structure at times which is more akin to a chain that ties them down, or to a little box that keeps them closed in, keeps them doing the right thing. But of course, that's not the purpose of the law at all. The negative approach to the law in our relationship with God might keep people doing the right things, but it won't help to increase in holiness, because holiness primarily is about knowing ourselves to be in relationship with God and relationship with each other. And that's the second view of the law, not something to constrain us and keep us penned in because otherwise it would mess everything up, but rather as a path to life. A path that shows us the right things to do to bring us into greater flourishing, and the things that cease from doing that limit our relationships with God and with each other. This is what a good God gives us. A God who is ultimately loving God wants us to share in his life, and he wants us to be an extension of his life, his love, and grace for others. And so that's why it makes sense that as we look at the commandments, which Jesus sums up into the great commandment, love the Lord your God and your neighbor as yourself, ultimately it is a principle of communion. Because God did not create us to pen us in and limit us. He created us to be infinitely united with him in love and to bring others into that infinite and profound union. And so today the invitation the Lord gives us is to examine how we're living our relationship with the commandments. Are we living it out of obligation? Are we living it almost resenting what God is asking of us? Or are we living it with the grace that helps us see that in the commandments is that call to relationship, that call that unites us and gives us life? When we live out of obligation, we may resent certain things like asking for forgiveness or even admitting that we've committed a fault. But when we live out of love, then of course we want to do those things which are of benefit to the beloved. And when we act or speak in such a way that harms those relationships, we feel it in the depths of our being. This is the direction God wants us to move in. And this is where the law and the sacraments make sense. It's not simply a list of demands, not checking off expectations. It's entering into a relationship of love that invites us to recognize the things we do for our beloved, and also invites us to recognize that when we fail to do those things, the natural thing to do is to ask forgiveness and seek to heal those relationships. As we continue with this Mass, then, let's make that our prayer. However we see God's law in this moment, let us ask God's help to shift so that more and more we see it as an expression of God's love for us, and we see following his law as an expression of our love for him and for each other.